to Reading Your Way to Heaven. This is Jason Spolstra, and as always with me, Gabe Gutierrez. Gabe, how are you doing?
Jason, I'm doing well, man. How's it
Good.
going? How you doing?
Good. I know we usually do some small talk, but there's so much to cover in this chapter. I think
my
we should
gosh.
just jump into it.
It's so good. Yeah. No, I can't wait. I'm excited to talk about it.
It was a really great chapter, but
and Brother Edmund, man, this is awesome.
But I
go from Lavrans, who's like solid guy, and then you have another like solid, awesome, we were doing our wild predictions at the end of last week. There's no way we could have guessed what happened in this chapter.
No.
Not even close.
Not even close.
Oh, so good. I'm 2 chapters in, loving the book so far.
Well, that makes 2 of us. So we are kind of a little bit fast forwarding from the end of chapter 1. So where we last left off, she met the elf maiden in the woods, and she gets back home, and she's, I don't want to say traumatized, but definitely is skittish now. But now we're fast forward because we ended with that kind of cliffhanger of, well, does this situation, is that going to hinder me being able to go with Faja down south? Well, we have our answer, Gabe.
Right. And ultimately the answer is no. She will get to make this trek. So when this chapter started, it didn't pick up right where we left off, right? You've touched on that. But if anything, it kind of scooted back a little bit before we left off, right?
Sure,
Maybe
yes.
even before that encounter altogether.
Correct.
To just give the context of every year Lavrans goes home, or he goes to Skog, he checks it out. And, you see this, right, in different stories where the dad would go off for some kind of a trip and the kids have to stay at home. And, it's tale as old as time, right? You see this in Cinderella. You see this in Old Yeller. You see this over and over, right? Where dad goes on a trip, comes back with gifts, and the kids always want to go with dad, right? Showing that kids have always wanted to go to work with dad since the beginning of time, right? You know what I'm talking about. So we have that set up, and this is the context of like there's Skog, right? This ancestral land of Lavrans, and the trip to Skog has been delayed. What's going on? And it turns out that there is some land acquisition going on, some dealings perhaps, some opportunities, and some hesitancy in parting with different land. So Lavrans, who has Skog, has been offered another piece of land, which is closer, makes more logistic sense. The person offering it to him has offered it for Skog, which is where that person wants to go. Like all the way around, it makes sense. You have this added little wrinkle, though, right? Lavrans' brother is like, whoa, wait a second. That's my family's land, too. I'd like that. And just figuring out all that family details and minutia has delayed the trip. And, you've got Kristin, who's coming off of this experience. It does kind of scoot back a little bit to touch on it, like you said. She was kind of frazzled from it at first and kind of eventually in time got over it. If anything, what did it say? That the more time passed, the more fondly she remembered it, or the more vividly she remembered it?
More vividly, yeah. She's able to remember it much better in detail, is the way I took it.
Yes, yeah, that's right. The more, every time she thought about the elf maiden, the more yearning she'd have to take another trip to go to Skog specifically. And so eventually, yes. The birds, yes.
Yeah,
she gets to go.
The other important thing here too is just like answering the why. Why is he going down to Skog? And the simple answer is that's his family's land. That's his heritage. And
why does he want to take her?
So basically, as you were saying earlier, there's land acquisition, and this could be the last time that she could see it, basically, and he wants her to experience where she was born and just to visit some of the people and just talk about her heritage.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Like before we lose this, let's at least take her to experience this, to see it, to spend some time in it.
And of course, we then shift gears to Kristen's mother, Ragenfrid, and or Ragenfried, and her that passive aggressive
I
motherly
know, right?
guilt tripping. Are you happy then, my daughter, to be going so far away from me? Ugh, typical moms.
Oh, so you just can't wait to leave here, can you?
Kristen does a pretty good job of sidestepping that. Like, she's like, "Mom, quit guilt tripping me here," but yeah, kind of.
No, she had a solid answer for sure. The no, dear mother, but I'm happy to be going with my father, and that was it. Yes, I suppose you are. And then that's it. That kept moving, right?
Mm-hmm. And so they're packing everything up during this conversation and getting everything ready for this great journey. And again, Sigrid, I don't know if that's how you pronounce the author's name, or Sigrid, maybe Sigrid, does a beautiful job. Just the attention to detail and painting the picture throughout this chapter. It is so clearly vivid in your imagination, especially just this morning fog and the mist and the coolness. And
Totally.
then as the sun burns through it and lifts and vapors away and just, so good.
The fog hovering over the valley like milk over the village, right?
Yes.
You're there, like dripping, like, oh, that the whiteness. It's beautiful job describing it all.
And so they head off in this early morning, and they first basically they're riding along. She rides. That was another little fun fact I underlined here was Kristen's riding her father's old horse, and I just love the definition or the adjectives. It's just like Kristen's dad, just solid, stable, not gonna get skittish with anything around, and we'll protect her. We'll keep her safe.
Yes. Old, wise, and steady. Absolutely. Morven. I loved the name too. Morven. I mean, like, these are like probably standard names. I don't know.
You're right.
But like I loved, Goldsvein, right? The horse of the dad. Now we have Morven, the horse that Kristen is riding.
And then, as they're going along, eating, dripping, just more more descriptors of their ride, and then we have kind of a little break.
It's a little montage, right?
Yeah.
Like as they're traveling towards Skog, they're before they left, Ragnfried tells Lavrans, make sure you stop here. Make sure you say hi to these family members here. Make sure you acknowledge these friends that you're going to pass along the way. Now make sure, just like I can just picture it completely. And so they do that. They hit up all the places. They say hi to whoever they need to say hi to. And that's kind of like that last little paragraph before the break. I totally got that as like this little montage of like one night they're here, one night they're there, and it's like a wide array of experiences. One night they're in an estate with silk covered pillows in their beds, and the next night they're in like this roadside hostel, with this poor woman who's crying in the bed next to Kristen and her dad, so like, it's a pretty diverse set of experiences for sure.
And so they, like we said, there's a kind of a break. We kind of fast forward along the journey, and they arrive in Hammer or Hamar. I don't know how you would pronounce that. Sure. And basically, Kristen's sitting not in Morven's saddle, but in her dad's saddle because she can barely stay awake, and she's just kind of, how like when you're on a train or in the car, you just kind of get lulled to sleep, and that's kind of what's happening to her right now, but it's on a horse instead.
Yeah. That happens right before the break, and then right after the break, we've got her waking up. So maybe she fell asleep like there, and then now she's waking up, but she's waking up in this bed that she doesn't know. Like, wait a second, this isn't a saddle. My dad's not right here next to me. What is going on here? And immediately she sees her dad with some other woman that she has no idea who she is. And she starts, the very first thing she says, where are we? And that's where she discovers we're in Hammer now. Or Hamar, or however you say that.
And we are introduced to Margaret, the shoemaker Fartine's wife.
I totally wanted to hear how you were going to say that last name.
Hey,
The third grader in me was like, what's he going to say?
Yes. And she has a little present for Kristin. She has a pair of red shoes. And it's funny because, earlier I talked about how one of the other things she had to do constantly was wear a red dress in presenting to different people along the way. So now she's got some Dorothy shoes to match her red dress. But unfortunately, these red shoes don't really offer a lot of protection for the soles of her feet because as we go along, it's dead pitch black. It feels like it's the dead of night, but it's early in the morning, and they're heading to church, as we're going to find out. But along the way, the ground is rock hard. And it's really cold, and as it described, the mud and the earth is hardened, and so her feet are just feeling every bump along the road, and eventually one of her feet gets bust through the ice, and now it's cold and wet, and so eventually her dad's like, "Come here, sweetheart," and just picks her up and like carries her the rest of the way.
Yeah, and even before they leave, she's hearing these like this ringing. Like, what is going on? Like it's
That's
nighttime.
Right, yeah.
And there's this ringing. What is going on? And that's where she's like, it sounds like a church bell, but there's so many of them. What's going on? And Margaret, shoemaker Fartine's wife, says, it's our bells. That's all the church bells. So I was wondering along the way, I was like, oh, is there some kind of a feast? Like what? I wonder what is going on that is this cause for, come to worship, come to celebrate. And I don't know that we got like necessarily the specific
I never got an
answer to that.
Answer. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe it's like, I don't know, the blessing of work or something. There definitely were a lot of people who were like farmers and stuff that were there at the mass when we came to actually being there. But so it's church bells. And so they're making their way towards the church bells. And like, I don't know, it took me back to, I don't know if you've ever been in those moments, Jason, where you're maybe in, in Europe or in smaller towns where you're like, where's the church? Oh, bells. There you go. Follow the sound,
Yeah, absolutely. And this one is the great cathedral, as Margaret mentioned. And as Kristin explains it, she felt like she was entering the mountain
yes.
the size and scale. And you got to remember, this is before the existence of electricity. And so as she's going into the church, she can't see anything. She keeps looking and trying to see. And the only dim light she can see is a little bit of the candles on the altar.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I did love just little notes. And this is what we saw in chapter 1 as well. But just the piety of Lavrans along the way. Things like crossing himself and his child with holy water. Mm-hmm. Just the different acknowledgement, the kneeling down, the praying. Like all the different just... Like, this guy is legit. He walks the walk. This is part of his life. This is not just, well, got to go to church because it's what we got to do. And like this is a real thing. His faith is a real part of him. It's not just lip service, right? And I love just seeing those little notes of how it's lived out along the way.
So, what did you think about this crucifix that Kristin sees?
Yeah, I was wondering if this was maybe not a crucifix, right?
Yeah.
Maybe, what it reminded me of is the Basilica in D.C., mm-hmm. right, of the Immaculate Conception, where there's the mosaic of, is it Christ coming again in glory, right?
Correct, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so you've got this, like, massive mosaic of Jesus with, almost like golden hair, right? And kind of a stern face also. And so as I'm reading this description here, that here's this Jesus, right, with arms rigidly outstretched and gleaming gold. His hair was gleaming gold, and the crown, and his face was lifted upward with a harsh expression. It took me to DC, to the image there, the mosaic that we've seen a couple times.
Yeah, it's definitely a much more stern Christ and strong and godlike.
Yes,
especially for these people. And she's reminiscing and comparing and contrasting versus the crucifix that she saw at home, which is more of a traditional crucifix that we know and love. This is definitely a departure from that. Speaking of compare and contrast, she then tries to okay, I'm going to focus on what the priest is saying. I'm going to focus on the mass. But the priest is going so fast and she could barely hear him, and she just can't really keep up, and she's losing it. And she compares and contrasts, that's not like my priest at home where, he takes his time. We can clearly hear him. He's
taught us what these words mean, so I love that, right?
Yeah,
that
yeah.
line there, that he taught her what the holy words meant in Norwegian so that she could better keep her thoughts on God when she was in church. What even though he did kick her in the side one time, it's oh, that's a great, being pastoral, great example of the priest there, really trying to help his flock to engage more and lift their hearts and minds up to God. This is Kristin's first time really experiencing life outside of Jorngard. Right. I mean, she did have that little experience however many weeks or months before that, but that was, whatever it was. This is an actual extended journey. And certainly the first time perhaps she's going to a church like this. I mean, so way outside of the comfort zone. A lot of this is way outside of the comfort zone. And so from the massive cathedral compared to her small little warm wooden church, right? The image of Christ lifted high and the stern image, right, compared to just the comforting cross that she's come to just really know and love, and even just the pace of the priest in celebrating the mass, she's all the way around being pushed beyond the norm.
And then she's hearing other people come in, and she's looking back at the stern Jesus, and she's starting to fall back asleep like, a kid will do at mass. And, right before she's about to pass out, her father stands up and mass is over. And the priest came forward, and then she has a rather interesting interaction with the altar boy here.
She's looking at him, and when the altar boy notices that she's looking at him, he sticks his tongue out, makes a face, and then pulls out all this stuff from his pocket, typical boy cramming stuff in his pocket, right?
Fish hooks.
So it's lumps of lead, leather straps, dice, of course. All the while he's making faces at her, and she's just looking at him what is going on here?
And the priest just kind of laughs it off, but of course Lavran's like, all right, time to pack it up.
Yes.
And so they move from there. They go. This is where I kind of got a little lost in the church. I was trying to figure out where they went up to.
Yeah. So they walk, I think, through the side of the church. They eventually come out into the vestibule, so outside of the church, into this area, and there's a little stairway that leads them into. I mean, so here's the thing to note: this is not just cathedral building, the end, right? But this is cathedral with a campus, all surrounding it. And so as they leave, I suppose, the main church of the cathedral and go out into the side vestibule, they go into a side church, a side chapel that's in the west tower of this complex, if you will, or of this campus. And as they're going up the stairs into this chapel, this is where again, we see Lavrans walking the walk of his faith. The priest opens the door to this beautiful side chapel, which isn't like immediately next door to the main church area. It's a little ways down, but that's where they eventually went, is this side chapel. And Lavrans tells Kristin to, here, wait for me here on these steps just outside the chapel that we just climbed up. And I'm going to go to confession, and then I'll be right back for you. So, who among us haven't been there before, Jason?
The side chapel kind of reminded me, speaking of DC, of like the Franciscan monastery. And you have the upper church, and then in the second level to the right, kind of off in the corner, is the wedding chapel, I think it's known as, where it's the depiction of the wedding feast of Cana, and you can kind of see it from the main church, but it's still off in the distance, and it looks beautiful. I've actually never been to it yet, even after all these years, but it just kind of reminded me of that, just kind of slip over to the side, and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, where did this come from?
Yeah. And again, just to specify for the listeners, you're referring to the Franciscan monastery in Washington, D.C., and which is what a great experience. For sure, if you're ever in that area, definitely please go experience that. Jason and I, we've had the privilege to get to go to the March for Life in Washington, D.C. for a number of years. Not unlike Kristin's experience here, definitely a lot of diverse experiences, random encounters along the way. But yeah, no, I like that place in particular is its own little complex or campus. And so, yeah, I would imagine you're not too far off here, I don't think.
She falls asleep. You
got to it's just early morning, right?
Yeah.
It's pitch black when the thing starts. Maybe sun is rising a little bit. She's got to be just exhausted. And so, yeah, she falls asleep sitting there, and I love this little introduction.
Yeah, so there's this monk that comes walking by and offers her this kind of cloth of some sort. Basically, he pulls it. At first, I thought he was going to be pulling it out of his habit. The way he was kind of setting it up, I was like, oh, that's cool. He's going to pull it out of his sleeve, out of his habit or something. But no, it's out of the rock in the stairwell area. And he pulls it out and lays it down for her. And he basically was like, just it's a little softer, it's a lot warmer than the cold stone for you. And then he just kind of walks away. And that's, you're like, oh, that was really nice of this random monk.
So kind. Here, let me pull these rags out from here and set this up so that you have some insulation between you and this cold stone. But here's the real nugget here that I like. He does that to care for her, but you see in that line there, he goes down the stairs in his bare feet.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So he himself is experiencing all that this cold stone has to offer, right? He's not thinking about his own discomfort or about his own, displeasure. No, here's this child, and let me care for her while I just continue to endure. I didn't even know who the guy was, and already I was like, oh my gosh, how humble was that encounter? How beautiful was that?
And then she falls back asleep, and when Father Martin, opens the door, she kind of wakes up, and now it's time for some veneration of relics. And in particular, Kristin and her father kneel down and venerate the relic of St. Thomas of Canterbury, and specifically his bloody clothing.
Yes. And after that, Lavrans is ravished. He is just starving.
He'd been fasting.
It's been again, right? We keep pointing to it, but there's these nuggets all along the way. He fasted before confession, which means he went to mass before confession, so he fasted before mass. He hasn't had anything to eat all day. And I know it's morning time, but he's been traveling. He's, hungry for sure. And the fact that it says he's fasted shows the intentionality behind it, right? It's not like, oh, I just haven't eaten yet. No, it's like, no. I intentionally have not eaten so as to receive Christ in the Eucharist and then to experience confession, right? Or so as to go to mass and then to go to
Right.
confession prior to actually receiving food. Yeah, again, we're just seeing the holiness of this really awesome man.
They go outside. He's ready to eat. Siegfried just or Sigrid goes on to use her adjectives and painting the scenery of the distant lake Myosa or
Miosa. The
Miosa.
J's got that Y sound.
Yeah, and just this beautiful scenery. I'm guessing it's a total guess, but I'm guessing it's probably October right now, given where he's talking about the multicolored leaves float down
Yeah.
on the frost. So it's it's beginning to get cold. There's frost in the air, and yes, I mean it's also the Nordic countries, so it gets
Well,
colder
so
sooner.
if the previous trip happened maybe in the summer,
Right.
and this is however much later, October's not crazy. And then just to kind of jump ahead to the end, it says that they've returned, and it was the beginning of Advent, right? And we saw some of the snowfall. So yeah, I think October is probably a pretty solid guess.
And we run into the bishop. The bishop makes a drive by and stops and wants to have a little chat and visit with
With Lavrans,
Lavrans,
little
man.
old Lavrans. I'm telling you, like it's like, oh, this guy's kind of a big deal, you know?
Da bella da ball.
Yeah.
And of course, Lavrans, though, of course, just is worried about Kristin and trying to figure out, like, okay, how are we who's gonna take care of her? And they start talking, and he requests if Father can take care of her, and he said, "Oh, of course, that's no problem. In fact, I've got a wonderful monk brother Edvin that can help take care of her while you're away."
And this is the monk. This is the brother that had made that show of kindness to Kristin earlier when she was waiting for her dad during confession. And there's a couple of I don't know if I would say mean remarks, but definitely like kind of little jabs in the side, perhaps in jest, or in just kind of having fun towards brother Edvin, about like he doesn't mind, he gathers up all the children he can, that way he has somebody to preach to.
He takes it in stride, though.
Yeah, again, he just answers in humility, and we just see another example of just like, oh man, there is something to this guy. Right then I'm like, I hope we get to hear more, and Jason, we do.
For the next 7 pages. But all great stuff. And I think what was really kind and really sweet was, I guess, around page 30, where it talked about how Brother Edwin gave her, being Kristin's, hand a little squeeze. And when they glanced at each other, they both had a laugh. And it's just that smile and just the innocence within that, and then they're off to have a little I say adventure, but we get to learn more about what brother Edvin does for the church and what he's doing there.
Yeah. In that same paragraph there that you just referenced, it's towards the end that the line stood out to me, that she's describing how he looks, the wrinkles, and the line is, it looked as if brother Edvin had become so wrinkled simply from smiling at people. Right? Kristin thought that she had never seen anyone who looked so cheerful or so kind. Like, yep, there you go. I mean, that's him. He's got and we see it, right? He's caring for other people. There's other people that he's tending to, and the way that he deals with them, maybe not to get into every little encounter into great detail, but there's people who've had different experiences and maybe don't have the greatest attitude, and everyone, he's just so kind and so patient and so positive, and it's just like, this guy's a saint.
He's acting as a true religious brother, someone that genuinely lives out the vows that he took of poverty, chastity, and obedience.
Yeah, just I mean, so gentle, so loving, so humble. Um, yeah, awesome guy. Awesome encounters here. And after their encounters with the people in the guest house, and they gave Kristin some food there, breakfast. They then go back into the church, into the complex, and they kind of go around the construction and up into the choir loft. There's some scaffolding, and they climb up into the scaffolding, and Edmund's got like he wants to show Kristin something, and he says, "Don't turn around," and until it's all the way ready. And she turns around, and then she sees it's a stained glass window, right? But
Right.
it's got to be the most stunning, amazing stained glass that she's ever seen in her life.
I mean, do you think she's seen stained glass window before?
I mean, I don't know, right?
I don't think she
just
has.
had this simple chapel in Yornard,
Right.
and there were paintings. I think she said that they did have in the church, but nothing like this. And even if it was stained glass, it would not have been. I mean, not even close.
No.
To what she's experiencing here.
And again, just the beautiful descriptors here of the reds and the greens and the yellows and just all the colors that are beaming through the stained glass, and the explaining the stories of what the stained glass windows is explaining. But I mean, well, and we'll get to in just a second, but of Christ right there. But then she
I loved the line. It was like standing at a great distance and looking into heaven.
yes.
Like, yeah. And the image that came to my mind, because we just came off of this, was in Paradise when Bernard is explaining to Dante the rose. And he sees Mary, and he sees John the Baptist, and he sees just all the saints and angels that are filling all the levels and seats in this rose. And here we have this stained glass where it's just like this awesome moment. And again, now instead of Bernard, you've got Edmund, kind of guiding Kristin. That's immediately where my mind went.
And then after she goes through, seeing the window pane, seeing the stained glass windows, she sees they climb down the ladder and they went up into the choir, and there they stood and seeing everything. And this is where Brother Edvin shows Kristin what he's working on, which is painting pictures and carving tabernacles, which is his expertise. He's very skilled in this art of making choir chairs and altars and anything for the church furniture and furnishings for the church here. And so he's, in particular, he grabs some of the colors, in particular red is what he was working on at the time, and kind of doing some detail work here.
And so she goes on to describe this first painting that she's saying, and I laughed out loud. I was like, my wife was in the room. I was like, you've got to hear this. And it's this picture of Christ with Saint Nicholas and Saint Clement. But then it goes on to have images of Saint Nicholas's life. And the first little image, the first little story, I don't know. I literally had a laugh out loud moment, Jason. I don't know if you wanna tell the audience what it was.
And I had to smile too, especially with my almost 4-month-old son right now. So I was like, I can't imagine my son doing this. Of basically Saint Nicholas sitting on his mother's knee and refusing to take his mother's milk because he refused to nurse more than just one time on Fridays in order to fast. He's so holy.
I'm laughing right. I'm like, yes, that was great. I love that. It was so holy. No. That's it. I'm good.
I've had my fill, mother.
Yeah, I'm satiated. And then there's the more familiar images and stories that we've heard of Saint Nicholas and his life. And um,
I didn't see him slapping heretics though,
yeah, that
so
part
I
we
was a
did not see.
little
Yeah,
sad that that wasn't depicted in there.
kind of a bummer. Yeah. And then he goes on to describe. She goes on to describe another painting with
Hmm.
Mary and Saint Suniva and Christina, of where that's the saint, that's Kristen's namesake. And there's this dragon that is so small,
Hmm.
and this Kristen notices it and says, "Whoa, whoa, the dragon seems really small. Like, there's no way that can take them on." And then we get into a little bit of catechesis here
Yes.
that was so rich.
Hmm.
It was beautiful, Jason.
Yes. Yes. And just pause right here, and before I let you kind of you can unpack that, this why it's so important not to let the devil take a hold of us through this depiction. I was just on pulling back. This is why in our catechesis, and in especially if you are a CCD teacher or a catechist or a youth minister or campus minister, DRE, whatever, even if if you have kids, this is why it's so important to have sacred images and sacred art constantly around in your homes, in your workplaces, and take them to beautiful. This is why Gabe and I rail about the need for beautiful churches and to have stained glass windows and to have these beautiful artwork. Not only does it invokes the awe and the inspired and the literal awesomeness of God, but it also can invoke a simple question. They can see one little thing in this picture and they ask, well, that seems kind of odd. Why is that dragon so small? And now you have your chance. Now you have the chance to unpack why he's depicting this demon, this dragon, to be so little itty bitty.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, you can tell Edvin relishes this moment here
Yes.
to share the truth with Kristen. And so his response um, is that dragons and all other creatures that serve the devil only seem big as long as we harbor fear within ourselves. But if a person seeks God and enters into his power, the power of the devil, at once suffers such a great defeat that everything becomes small and impotent. Right? That the truth is that they are no bigger than that, because these holy women, these saints, have submitted themselves to God, and there's nothing to fear at that point. Right? God's got them completely. That the devil, and everybody that serves the devil, is nothing more than just a little nuisance, a little pest.
And then she goes on to just continue to ask more questions about, weren't they, the stories of, weren't they in the caves, and what is
Right?
true here?
Because there's that you know oh, I've lost the term, but just the contradictory of the reality here, right? That they died in the caves, and yet the mountain is so small that it can fit on her skirt, but yet they were inside of that mountain. So what gives? And he's saying, yeah, okay, so like in some ways, sure, yeah, they were inside, but in the bigger scheme of reality, that this was nothing. This was a little thing, and because they were gods and because they submitted to him, this was just a trial for them to endure.
Yeah, when I read this, it reminded me of Psalm 23. Though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil. It's like, yeah, I'm in this cave, I'm in this dark, but I'm with the Lord, so it's nothing. It's a tiny cave because the Lord's and His light is always perpetually shining upon me. And then she asks the deepest question. Now she's getting to the heart of it. But what if a person doesn't fear and love God? Because he's showing this dragon so small and the cave is so small, like all these fears and bad things are. But the question is, okay, but what about the people that don't fear God and don't
Yeah,
love Him? What's going to take
yeah,
place? And brother he has a great answer. There's no one, Kristen, who does not love and fear God. but it's because our hearts are divided between love for God and fear of the devil and love for this world and this flesh that we are miserable in life and death. And this division within our hearts and within man is why the Son of Man came.
Yeah. There's a line here. If a man knew no yearning for God and God's being, then he would thrive in hell. But he does not thrive in hell. Why? Because he does deep down have even a basic like awareness and yearning for God that he then denies. Right. So what a great way of thinking about that. No. Mm-hmm. Everyone loves and fears God. Do they allow things to take that place, though, to interrupt that? Do they set that love and fear to the side in favor of other things?
It's kind of like a certain saint we're reading about on Wednesdays. He had a quote about that.
Yeah, a little bit.
Something about restlessness and heart.
Mm-hmm. and then Kristin looks up at him and is like, understands nothing of what he just said. And again, I just laughed out loud.
And then he goes on and starts cracking some jokes here using some farm animals.
Yeah, the animals at the nativity, right? The rooster was the first being to know of the birth of Christ, and so Christus natus est, but he says it like a rooster crowing. I would imagine it was something like that. Yes.
Yes.
And it goes on and on about the ox and the goat and the sheep and the calf and it was so good.
So good.
And she's like staring at him and he's like, you haven't heard this before? Surely that, Father Eric, who lives with you, he probably doesn't know because you wouldn't know unless you've kind of been around to different places like Paris, which then invites Kristin to say,
have you?
Exactly. And then again, I loved his response because it's complete humility. Mm-hmm. Yes, I have been, but that doesn't make me better. That doesn't make me better than anybody else. Because I fear the devil and love and desire this world like a fool. But I hold on to the cross with all my strength. And then the one must cling to it like a kitten hanging onto a plank when it falls into the sea. What great imagery!
Hang in there, kitty.
Yeah, no joke.
That image of the cat hanging on the wire, and goes on, just asking brother asks her a couple of questions. Brother Edvin. Asking about her family and
Oh, this was great though. Like the question is like, what about you, Kristin? How are you going to serve Our Lady?
Mm-hmm.
And it's this little girl, and he's not watering things down here. He's saying like the expectation. How are you going to serve? I know you're little, but you gotta start thinking about these things. And her response is like, well, I'm the only child. I'm sure they're saving for my dowry. I'm probably going to get married. And I loved his response there. Like, oh yeah, that's how people think, unless they have so many kids, then they're like, okay, God, you can take a couple. Or if one of their kids is like, nobody wants them for some reason, and yet they wonder why men and maiden who live in cloisters are not all holy people. I was like, got some biting commentary from Brother Edvin here.
And then we know they probably had some more conversations, but that's all is written here. And so it trails off into Brother Edvin taking Kristin around more of the sacristy and the church and showing her some more of the pictures and the books and the stands and on and on and on. And just, giving her the full tour of this beautiful church.
Then they grab something to eat and they are rejoined by her father. And they recall, oh yeah, we're supposed to give a message to the shoemaker. Oh well.
Whoops.
And then we get to the end of the trip, right? We have a little kind of a break there. And this last couple paragraphs of the chapter is just a wrap up of this trip. And so she spent, of all the time in this trip, it's these days that she spent in Hamar that were just so vivid that she remembers better than everything, even better than Oslo. Because by the time she gets to Oslo, she's like, okay, well, I've already been to Hamar, right? Like it's not as new, it's not as special.
Yeah, I was about to say that was a part that I underlined, where she says, nor did she think Skog was as beautiful as Jongard, even though the buildings were finer. And it just made me think, there's no place like home. Like you can go to some of the most beautiful cities, the biggest cities, but there really is no place like home.
She was glad she wasn't going to live there. Like, oh, I'm okay with that. I'm happy to be here to see it. Nice to visit. Wouldn't want to live there.
Exactly. And then, like you mentioned earlier, and just now, they got home and they arrived just in time for the beginning of Advent to start.
Yes, and we hear what happens with Skog. That Lavrans turns Skog over to his brother, but retains the right of repurchase for himself and for his descendants. So he lets go of Skog, but still... like not completely. Like, yes. I'm gonna let you have it, but if I change my mind, I get it back.
Or if something happens to you, I get first dibs. I get the first crack at it.
That's right.
Which I think is fair.
Yes. Which made me wonder. So then he makes this deal with his brother, which I guess that means he doesn't with the guy at the very beginning of the chapter.
That's what I suppose. Unless. The only thing I could think of was unless if his brother's paying him for that land, could he theoretically take that money and then sell his current land or sell where he's currently at to then purchase
Formo,
the other guy's
land? Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, I would hate for him to have FOMO on Formo,
I see what you did there. Yeah, I don't know. I could see being as easily as, he just said, thanks, but no thanks. I'm going to go with my brother. Blood's thicker than water, so.
So, speaking of blood, Jason, what's your prediction for the next chapter?
There will be blood. What? I don't know. I mean, I feel like there's got to be a conflict at some point to get the story going, but I don't know if it's going to happen this chapter or next chapter.
I got to tell you, I was reading this chapter so tense because I was like, "Where's the conflict? When is it coming?" And it never did. It was like just awesome. But yeah, I mean, I feel it. Like there's something coming. I think
it's ticking tighter and tighter. Tightening on around you. No, I hope, in my prediction, my hope is that we get a chapter all about the Christmas season, the preparation for Christmas season, and then the actual celebration of the Christmas season. I think that would be really nice. Especially the way the author has used her vocabulary and the descriptors and stuff. I would love to see the town and her church and her house and how they celebrate the season.
I really appreciate, again, this is not an overtly Catholic book. I mean, it definitely seems like it when you're reading it, but it's not, the author didn't write this to say, I'm going to write a great Catholic novel. What she's doing is writing what she knows,
right.
And what reality was like for the people in this time setting. And it's just a beautiful book that describes the real lives of these people, and in doing so describes this beautiful faith. And man, I just so appreciate that. It's touching.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Anything else?
No, that's it for me. I just can't wait till we dive into the next chapter.
I can't wait either, and I hope y'all, dear listeners, can't wait as well. Thank y'all so much for listening and joining us each and every week, and come back next Monday for Chapter 3. Remember our website, readingyourwaytoheaven.fireside.fm. We're also on YouTube now. I posted chapter 1 last week on our channel. So if for some reason someone doesn't have podcasts or would rather listen or, have it in the background on YouTube, you can search Reading Your Way to Heaven on YouTube and should be the first thing that pops up.
Please subscribe and click the bell for notifications. Even if you listen to it on your podcast player, if you wouldn't mind doing us that favor, just so that, it helps the algorithms and people to find what we do a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Also, YouTube is a great place for you to leave comments on particular episodes. I know sometimes we say, please like and give us 5 stars and share a comment, but it's tough on the different podcast players. But on YouTube, it really makes that a lot easier for you to interact with us on each episode.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. It's less clicks for you than trying to go on Discord. And if you don't have a Discord profile and blah, blah, it could be like, oh, I don't want to go through all those hoops. It's right there on YouTube, and we can continue the conversation there. So anyways, hope y'all have a great rest of your week if you don't listen. Otherwise, we will see y'all on Wednesday, and God bless y'all. Love you, bye.
Love you, bye.